Hello, this is Josh Agel, probably better known as the artist Shag. I'm here in Palm Springs, and you are listening to U.S. Modernist Radio.
Mama don't allow no architecture around here. Mama don't allow no architecture around here. Oh, I don't care what Mama don't allow, gonna draw mine modern anyhow. Mama don't allow no architecture around here.
Welcome to U.S. Modernist Radio, where we talk and laugh with people who enjoy, own, create, dream about, preserve, love, and hate modernist architecture, the most exciting and controversial buildings in the world. Nowhere in the world celebrates modernism better than Modernism Week in Palm Springs, California. Every February, this 11-day architecture and design festival hosts exciting architecture documentary premieres, eye-popping house parties, modernist house tours, insightful lectures, designer shopping, detailed exhibitions, and much more. And for almost 10 years, U.S. Modernist Radio has been your gateway, reporting from the U.S. Modernist Compound, aka poolside at the hip Hotel Skylark, interviewing guests from architecture and design, plus special guests right here in the studio. I'm Tom Guile. If you're into mid-century modernism, Modernism Week in Palm Springs is the epicenter of the architecture we love. Want to go with U.S. Modernist in February 2025 and stay at the U.S. Modernist Compound? Email George at usmodernist.org. Folks, it's a sad day in the studio because this is the last Modernism Week show of 2024. We've already brought you 11 wonderful episodes from our annual pilgrimage to the epicenter of modernism. And today we wrap up the series with 3 amazing returning guests, mid-century historian Charles Phoenix, Natascha Drabbe of IconicHouses.org, and traveling all the way from Canberra, Australia, Phillip Jones, the Martini Whisperer, plus one new guest, LA stylist and Lautner owner Andrew Vatera. And here's your host, returning to the show for the 367th time, Mr. Modernism, George Smart.
Thanks, Tom. Tom and I keep showing up here to run this crazy show because, really, who else is going to do it? As the expression goes, find a niche and fill it. U.S. Modernist Radio heads into our 10th year with new architect profiles, modernism authors, architecture documentary filmmakers, sons and daughters for our Children of Genius series, and more remotes from the road all around America. As this year's Palm Springs series winds down today, we want to thank all the Palm Springs guests, our faithful listeners who tune in like clockwork, our growing band of new listeners, our Palm Springs tour and party guests, and the hardworking staff and volunteers of Modernism Week. U.S. Modernist Radio is underwritten by June Goldfinger and Jeff Taylor, sponsors of Circle, Square, Triangle, a traveling exhibition on the architecture of Myron Goldfinger, and by Diane Bald and the Budman family, restoring significant architecture in Palm Springs, Toronto, Los Angeles, and Malibu.
Returning podcast guest Charles Phoenix is a performer, author, explorer, collector, and mid-century pop culture expert. He celebrates classic American lifestyle from the 1940s through the 1970s. His repertoire includes hilarious slideshows, classic car joyride videos, coffee table books, and hosting modernism tours on top of double-decker buses. He has appeared on Cake Wars and Nailed It, and is a vintage appraiser on Storage Wars. His latest slideshow is titled New York City and the 1964 New York World's Fair. Here's George talking poolside with the one and only Charles Phoenix.
Charles, I have talked with you several times before, and I just learned that you and I are both Sagittariuses.
Oh yes, I was always told that we say exactly what we feel, and we put our foot in our mouth a lot.
One of those, yeah, exactly.
And that we're good at sports, which I'm not, except for miniature golf.
Me neither. Oh yes.
Oh, I love miniature golf.
Yeah, you get into that windmill at the right time, right?
All the suns and the stars and moons aligned. Yes, when I'm between a windmill and a castle and a big shoe, I can get a hole in one.
You are the Tiger Woods of putt-putt.
Well, I wouldn't go that far, but I do love miniature golf. But I am bad at sports, but we're supposed to be good at sports since we're Sagittarians.
Really? I didn't know that.
Oh, yeah. And then what else do we do? We're the life of every party.
Yes?
I don't think I am.
Aha. Yeah. Look, folks, if you don't think Charles Phoenix isn't the life of the party, then you're at the wrong party, really.
I do
mean, come
enjoy
on.
parties, though. I do. I really do. I love talking to people. I really enjoy. And Palm Springs is just loaded up with people who are interesting to talk to around every corner. I mean, you just meet people on the street and start, stand there and talk to them for 20 minutes. It's that kind of town. It's a very friendly town.
How long have you been doing your signature bus tours?
I've been doing the bus tours here in Palm Springs for, maybe 9 or 10 years already.
A long
I think.
time.
I mean, it kind of all runs together. But yeah, I've been doing it for a while. I really enjoy it because I love playing that host role, and I love, sharing my passion for the city. And, it's such an easy sell, Palm Springs. You get these people on the bus. They're all so happy to be there. And people come from all over the world. We had Zambia yesterday, New Zealand today, all over the United States. And I always ask everybody when they get on the bus, where are you visiting from? So I like to know because I like to talk about wherever they're from. It's interesting. But, everyone's smiling the whole time on the bus because it's Palm Springs is just, and it's never even been prettier than it is this year. The weather has been never better.
Never
it's like
better.
75 degrees.
And during the day,
and it's
56 at night.
It's perfect. There's always a little restaurant to go to or a little club or a little party at someone's house. It's a very convivial society. I always say, kind of in a half fun way, but really it's a show-off society as well. It's very theatrical and people enjoy dressing up. People enjoy hosting you in their homes. The doors are always flying wide open. Come over and visit our house. And people love to show off their new kitchen and their new furniture and all that stuff. But it seems like everyone here is from somewhere else. It also seems like, in a kind of a wonderful, deep character kind of a way that everybody here has kind of been around the world at least once. Everyone's kind of crashed and burned like once, So I don't know. The people here are very interesting, and I just enjoy them always.
Now, when Charles talks about bus tours, let me paint the picture for you. You're not just on some average bus. You're on the top level of an open double-decker bus, traveling around the neighborhoods with Charles at the front with a microphone, quipping about different things, the people, the neighborhoods, the sculptures, the streets. Highly entertaining. I've been on it. It's great.
Thank you. Well, it's funny because I realized I just came from doing a tour right now. It's like 2.5 hours, and I almost never stop talking. It's a lot of tour guiding, basically.
Yes.
I mean, what are we looking at? Why is it important? Why are we here? Why'd you pay the big bucks to see this? So, I do my best to speak in terms that everyone's going to understand. I mean, it's a smart group of people, but,
right.
It doesn't matter. It's still like maybe they've never seen it before. So, what's the there, here, stuff like that. Why? What are we looking at this? What's the ABC 1, 2, 3 of what makes it interesting and important and unique? And that's basically what we're pointing out here is this is a town that has many, many unique features, and especially, the architecture, the ambiance, the nature here. But I always say that, we don't travel to a city to see what we can see or experience in our own town.
Right.
We travel to a place to see what's unique and different about it. And so I also talk about historic preservation, and, everyone's always so shocked when I say that, every single day, and basically every night as well, it seems, that the preservationists in this town are fighting off the developers like crazy. Now that Palm Springs, has absolutely established itself as a destination location in a very big way, and tourism here has exploded year by year more and more since the revitalization, that the developer is like, okay, well, if we've got this many people coming here, every week or whatever, we could build this, we could build that, we could bulldoze that, we could bulldoze that to build, all this crazy stuff, 1 million Starbucks. And that's exactly what we don't want. We want to keep the city unique and keep what's special about it special.
On these tours, which, again, you've been doing for years and years, people are just amazed at the scope of Palm Springs because you read the advertising and you see the houses and you think that's great. They've got these houses there. And then you discover like dozens and then hundreds. And all of a sudden you're calculating perhaps thousands that you're driving through all these streets. And it's not just one-offs. It's intact neighborhoods that have survived over the decades, which is thrilling to see if you're into this.
Yeah, on my tour, I say we do the east, the west, the north, and the south, and virtually we do. But I also say we're just scratching the surface because literally it would take a lifetime and more to kind of get the stories and the glories and the lores and the legends and the landmarks of it all. There is so much here. It's a microculture, Palm Springs. I mean, there are many places that have microcultures, but, they're not everywhere, and we don't take them for granted, and we know them when we find them. But Palm Springs is definitely one of those towns that has its own legend, its own lore, its own landmark. It's a microculture. And, I don't say it in a disrespectful way, but when people say, oh, we're going to Palm Springs, we're staying in Rancho Mirage, I'm like, okay, no, it's fine. No disrespect implied or intended. There's lots of loveliness in Rancho Mirage, but it's not Palm Springs. And neither is Palm Desert, and neither are any of the other desert cities here in the Coachella Valley. Palm Springs is a rock star. Palm Springs is a superstar. And this is where the legend and the lore and the landmark actually is. So, let's not mistake Palm Springs for any other community or any other community for Palm Springs. Palm Springs is an extraordinary place, unique in all the known universe.
Now, each year, Charles, besides leading these great tours, you also take on some legends and lore. I know one year you did Florida, right?
Yes, my big retro slideshows.
Yes. And this year, you did the World's Fairs.
Yes, I did. I collect other people's old slides. I've been doing this this is the 32nd year of collecting other people's old Kodachrome slides. Found photography, if you will. And this year, every year they have me. I do a show at the Annenberg at the Palm Springs Art Museum. This year, the show was all about New York City and the World's Fair of 1964 and 65. So all the slides.
And 39, too.
No, I didn't show the 39
No, 39,
stuff, but
okay.
I do have some Kodachrome slides from the 39 World's Fair. And that's really kind of the beginning of Kodachrome slide photography, is basically about 1939. Very few people had a Kodachrome film camera in their hands, or a film camera that had that film in it at the time. But anyway, it was the beginning of Kodachrome virtually. But by the 60s, there were many people who had Kodachrome film in their camera. And so I've, over the years, collected all these images of all these different places, and I do these themed shows. And you can actually watch many of them, including the New York City Land slideshow, on my website, on demand, charlesphoenix.com. Just go to Watch On Demand. Anyway, but the show, that I did yesterday was New York City Land. So the first half was all about New York City, mostly in the 50s, and then we go to the World's Fair of 1964 and 65. And, looking at the images of the World's Fair, it's just shocking how underrated it is. There's so much unique architecture.
Incredible.
Absolutely incredible. I mean, there's some cheesy parts and stuff, of course, as there would be, as there could be. Of course. But at its core, some of these modernist structures that were built, they still look futuristic to this day. And,
the towers on campus, I believe they're restoring some of those now.
The New York State Pavilion of 64, Phillip Johnson. Yeah, the towers I guess they're being restored. I mean, let's hope, because they do deserve to stay there. But anyway, it was just kind of interesting. I going through all the images that I have of the 64 New York World's Fair, I got to the point where I'm realizing there are a lot of dome buildings. They were really into domes.
Oh, big time.
Domes, and more domes. But, we love domes. Domes are so futuristic. And as it is, there are very few dome buildings in the world, really. I mean, in the realm of modern architecture or architecture otherwise. Well, no, there's a lot of domes in the world.
Early arenas.
Yeah. But there's not a lot of domes that got built after the World's Fair. But anyway.
And the World's Fair, I understand, of 64 was the prototype for Walt Disney building Epcot later on.
Well, in some ways, yes. I mean, Walt Disney and his Imagineers did definitely contribute to the World's Fair of 64. The Ford exposition or expo or whatever you call it was designed by him. That was Adventures Through... Wait, what was it called? Now I'm blanking. Adventures Through Time and Space. That's it. Welcome aboard Walt Disney's Magic Skyway, the world of...
Tomorrowland.
Well, it wasn't Tomorrowland. No, it was the Adventure Through Time and Space. And on that ride at the World's Fair in 64, your ride vehicles, it was a dark ride. The ride vehicles were actual 1964 Ford motor car convertibles. They had all of the cars, from the Continentals to the Falcons. You rode in a brand new Ford convertible car. as a ride vehicle.
That's crazy.
You did, and you can see it, and I showed it in my show yesterday. It was the most luxurious ride vehicles ever in the history of any dark ride ever. Part of that ride, Primeval World, actually lived on and still lives at Disneyland. In 66, when the fair was over, 65, they brought Primeval World, which was part of the Ford Skyway Time and Space. They brought it to Disneyland, where it still is today. When you ride around the train around and come back to Main Street, you'll go through Primeval World, and that is from the World's Fair. As is It's a Small World is from the World's Fair. Now we have that at Disneyland. You also have it in Florida. But the one at Disneyland is, most of it is from the original, which is amazing. And then also the Carousel of Progress, which was a theatrical presentation that you'd see that showed you how electricity changed household progress from the 1890s, 1920s, 1940s, and then sometime beyond the world of 1973.
Ooh.
So it was an incredible show that I enjoyed, an incredible attraction that I enjoyed at Disneyland as a child. Unfortunately, it left in 1975 when I was, 11 or 12 years old or whatever, and I was so mad. I'm still mad about it. And I don't get mad about much stuff, but that is such a disappointment. But the ride, or the attraction, General Electric's Carousel of Progress, taught me how to look through the layers of time, because that's exactly what you did. You saw a house from turn of the century, 1920s, 1940s, and beyond 1973. And it was just magic to the way my brain works. So Disneyland had such a huge impact on me as a child as far as style guides and motifs and all of that stuff. It really taught me a lot. And, people think it's ridiculous, but I even learned about, the world style guide, if you will, and It's a Small World. Like the mountain in Scotland is plaid. And so Scotland plaid. I mean, I always associated that.
Right.
And I took that with me. So it was such a learning tool. But the other thing was Great Moments with Mr. Lincoln was developed for the World's Fair as well. So we got 4 attractions from the World's Fair. They were, recycled and rebuilt at Disneyland.
That became the early animatronics. Right?
Early animatronics, yes. That was the first human figure that Disney developed, was Abraham Lincoln. And, funnily, weirdly, whatever I'm trying to say, interestingly, now the Great Moments with Mr. Lincoln, the version of Mr. Abraham Lincoln they have now is so realistic that it's mind-boggling. I mean, you're looking at it going like, wow. So Disney is the company that's going to develop fake people.
Yeah.
Better than anybody.
Anybody.
It's really a stunning show to see.
Abe will be walking around the stage and you won't see any cords or anything.
I mean, it's not, he doesn't quite walk around, but when he's standing there moving, you're like, God, they've really nailed it.
World's Fairs were also a key piece of American diplomacy, particularly when we participated in ones that were somewhere else in the world. And that changed a lot over the 70s and 80s, I understand.
Well, that I don't really know that much about. But speaking of other World's Fairs, the 1958 World's Fair that took place in Brussels, if you have not seen what it looks like, Google it immediately. Some of the best mid-century modern architecture you are ever going to see. It is a spellbinding campus of really exquisite buildings and structures and sculptures and statues and spaces and places and moments and all that and more galore. I really love.
And the Atomium is still there.
And the Atomium is still there. I have not yet made it to the Atomium, but the Atomium was, of course, the icon, the centerpiece, and the crowning touch of the 58 World's Fair in Brussels, as is in New York City. The Unisphere is the centerpiece, crowning touch, logo, and landmark of the 64 World's Fair. And thankfully, that incredible, iconic landmark still stands there to this day. So if you go to New York City and you're, coming in from JFK, going into the city, you're going to see it on your right side. You're going to go by Flushing Meadows, Queens, and you're going to see the site of the 39 World's Fair in New York and the 64 World's Fair. And very few buildings exist, but the Unisphere is still there, and it's my favorite sculpture on Earth.
And also, you can go to what's now called the Queens Museum, which, in addition to being a museum about New York in general, has all the artifacts that they have publicly about the World's Fair there.
Both of them, yes, the 39 and the 64 World's Fair. That is the building that the Queen's Museum, they call it, is in there on the side of the World's Fair. That's actually the 1939 New York Pavilion. That is one of the few pavilions of 1939 that never got torn down. They repurposed it in 64, and they obviously built a new pavilion for 64, the New York Pavilion, which is one of the few buildings that still stands there. But the weirdest and most interesting thing about what's inside the Queen's Museum there at the side of the World's Fair, which you can visit right now, is that world's largest city model of New York City.
I've seen that.
It's incredible. That was created for the World's Fair of 64, and it's an attraction that is still there right now. This minute, you can go there. You can get on a big jetliner and fly to New York City, and you are not going to be sorry. This model of New York City is absolutely exquisite in every detail and thrilling to see. I love maps, I love miniatures, I love all that. So you walk around it and you look over it. I believe during the time of the World's Fair, you were sitting in something that rotated all the way around it. But now you walk around it, which is fine. We can walk. But that's something that's there in New York to go see right now.
When I was at the Queen's Museum seeing this, they were telling us that they, every so often, go in and update the map. So what you're seeing is not the world of 1964. You're seeing today, when a new building is built, they will pull out the old little piece of cardboard that represented and plug in the new thing here.
I'm not sure every new building is represented, but there
Okay.
are probably some
Yeah.
that are. But yeah, I do think they update it, and you're not allowed to walk on it or anything. I mean, it's like whoever gets to walk on it is like the most special people on the planet,
Yes.
or people who work there. But I mean, they don't want you to step on a building,
No.
because that'd be terrible. But yeah, it's the treasure that's left from the 64 World's Fair, the model of New York City.
In your talk, did you discuss at all some of the other American icons like the Space Needle in Seattle?
Well, I'm so glad you brought that up.
Yes.
Since we are talking about World's Fairs, I guess we might as well just get it out in the open. I say, seriously, not joking around, that the Space Needle, in my opinion, is the greatest mid-century modern building on Earth.
On Earth.
Yeah. It's the most severe. It's really exquisitely designed. It's serious and, a little kitschy at the same time. It's theatrical, but it just works. It's perfect. It's perfect to the eye. It's perfect to the human psyche. And I've only been there once to go up it. And I got there and I said, how much to go up to the top? And she said $19. And I thought to myself, I cannot believe that. $19 to go up to the top of the Space Needle. Shouldn't it be $195?
Yeah.
I mean, it's absolutely... It's the it for me. It's the there for me when it comes to like the most iconic mid-century modern building.
And did you arrive there on the old monorail?
I did. I was shocked. The old monorail from 1962. So, yeah, the Space Needle in Seattle was built as the icon and the landmark and the centerpiece of the 62 World's Fair, which was officially sanctioned by the World's Fair organization. However, the 64 World's Fair in New York is a renegade, not officially sanctioned.
I did not know that.
Yes, that Robert Moses. That's
Robert
another whole
Moses.
story altogether.
The power broker.
I know, but the funny thing is, yes, when I went to Seattle, I'm like, I have to ride on the monorail from 62 because I love monorails. And of course, growing up at Disneyland, you learn to love monorails. Who wouldn't anyway? But I got to Seattle and I couldn't believe, I'm like, oh, I can't believe it. The monorail cars, both of them, look like they're absolutely in pristine, perfect 1962 colors and condition. What is going on here? I was certain that they were going to be wrapped in like some Fruitopia brand drink or something. Or I was sure they were going to be just like, advertising vehicles, literally. But no, they were perfect. Smooth ride, and the way the cars bank on a corner, it's exactly the same bank as the monorail at Disneyland does. So I felt right at home.
It is quite thrilling. If you go to Seattle, you can get on the monorail at one end. It's not that long. And then you make your approach towards the Space Needle, right? And the museum of, was it Rock and Roll, is at one of the nexus points. I can't remember where that is exactly.
Yeah, I think so. It's right there on the side of the World's Fair.
Yeah, and you go right into the museum. You connect to that, and then you get to the tower, and you can go up. about 3 or 4 years ago, the famous modernist architect Tom Kundig of Olsen Kundig did a renovation of the Space Needle, which has, made it even better than it was before and attracting even more tourists there. And of course, I also read that one of the biggest influences on the Space Needle, can you guess what it was?
What, flying saucers?
Frasier.
Frasier?
Because in the opening
the
credits
show.
of Frasier, you would always see the little thing of
Yeah.
the Space Needle, and people would go,
What's
"What is
that?"
that?"
Right.
Because that was, the 90s, the 2000s.
Yeah, it's funny because when I first went to Seattle, I asked the lady at the airport, do you know what year the Space Needle was built? And she said, I don't really know. I think about 1892. I'm like, no. Anyway, I always like to ask people that work in classic places, do you know what year this place started or whatever?
Right.
And 9 times out of 10, they have no clue. It's like, I'm just so curious about things, about the history of places. And that's, wherever I go, I like to go to the classic places, and every place has some classic places, at least one somewhere. And that's what I'm always going for, the old mom and pop shops, the oldest restaurants in town. I always Google oldest, whatever, hamburger stand, oldest bowling alley, oldest miniature golf course, or whatever. We'll drive-in movie theater, donut shop, wherever I go, just to kind of be in the there of these towns and these cities and find out what's unique and interesting.
Well, if you come to Raleigh, North Carolina, I'll take you to the Mecca, which is a small family-owned restaurant, 100 years
Oh, I
now.
love that.
My grandmother used to eat there after work when she would go and work for the housing department.
What's the specialty of the house?
I think it has varied over the years, but it's just comfort food like meatloaf, right, and chicken, and I believe it's a Greek family that owns it. So they have baklava as well, which was, very innovative for sleepy little Raleigh, North Carolina in 1930 to have baklava. That was exotic.
That still is. I know. Well, that sounds like my kind of place, exactly. I love to go to a place when you walk in the door and you have to ask yourself, what decade are we in? Mm-hmm. I love it. Love it.
During the pandemic, Charles, you expanded one of your hobbies. You became more of a painter.
Well, I started painting during the pandemic because you weren't going out everywhere, and I was so used to going out all the time. I love to go out. I love to go everywhere all the time. But, once it came time to stay home, I'm like, okay, now what am I going to do? So I have painted in the past, but it had been about 30 years since I picked up a paintbrush, more or less. And so I started painting, and, the main body of work that I did was a series of television sets. They are portraits of television sets as though they would be pictured in a manufacturer's catalog in about 1962. So I represent each of the styles of furniture back then, like Chinese modern and contemporary and early American and French provincial, so on and so forth. So I did one or two and basically all of those styles, and I named each of the paintings after a different part of Los Angeles. So there's the Westwood, and there's the Downtowner, and there's the Beverly Hills, the Sherman Oaks, and the Pasadena. There's even one called the Palm Springs. So I do have an art show coming up, and you can see them online on my website, charlesphoenix.com, but most of them have sold already.
Great.
Knock on wood, so I had to paint some more.
Yeah.
So, yeah, that's exciting. I know.
Now, when did the first remote come on the scene,
I think
Charles?
television remotes started in about 1955. They're early.
They were early?
Way earlier than we think, yeah.
Because I don't remember them until the late 60s.
I remember my
television.
aunt and uncle in the early 70s had one, and I would go over to their house and I'd click it. Of course, they'd say, stop playing with the remote. And, of course, we loved it. But my uncle would then say, look at this. And he'd click his keys, and that would also change the channel.
Oh.
Like clicky-clacky, your keys in your pocket.
Yeah.
Yeah, and that would change the channel.
I remember that before the internet, of course, there was some sort of hack that circulated among 8 or 9-year-olds that you could take a television remote and you could turn it into a garage door opener.
That I wouldn't know.
And we would all try it, of course, and it wouldn't work, and we would ruin the remote, much to our parents' dismay.
Well, I was never an electronic type of kid. I never took a transistor radio apart in a million pieces and tried to put it back together. That was not me. I'm not an engineer. I do love math, and I love numbers, but I'm more of a creative kind of, stories, and, I don't use the word history, but I am a historian. And I'm also crafty.
You are very crafty.
Yeah, I'm crafty.
Crafty. So the question I always ask you, I'll wrap up with.
What?
How is your archiving operation going so that we save all this immense trove of work?
Well, I'm glad you asked. My archive of other people's old Kodachrome slides, I've been collecting for 32 years, and I'm very, very lucky because I have a librarian that has been with me, Teresa Kennedy, for 20 years now. She comes over every Wednesday, like clockwork, and we sit and we yik-yak, or not, and she sorts the slides and edits the slides and puts them away and pulls them when I need them. And so the archive is in perfect order, thankfully. And to what's to become of it, though?
Right.
Is that a question?
Yeah, where's it going to go?
I don't know. So, the Getty has been talking to me now. The photo department called me up right before the pandemic and said, come over, we want to show you some stuff, and we want to come over to your house and see your stuff and all this. So they just called me back the other day and said, okay, now the pandemic's over, and we're back in line here. We want you to do a show. So I'm going to I did a show, 10 years ago at the Getty, but I'm going to do another show there. And I'll give you a sneak preview. I'm 99% sure I'm going to call the show The Power of Kodachrome. And the reason I'm going to call it The Power of Kodachrome is because it is a very, very deep well of information, of visual information, amateur photography in the 50s. In my case, I mostly have 50s and 60s stuff. That was kind of the heyday of it, really. And
you're going to need Paul Simon to open for you with the songs.
I
Kodachrome,
wish.
Right?
Could he? Would he? I don't think so. I don't know if he performs anymore. But we would weep if he did. Oh, just the mere thought of that. So that's the thing. I'm gonna try to talk about why Kodachrome is so important, because even these institutions, they're not that into it because it's amateur stuff. They don't really care about that.
It's like folk art.
They want It's like folk art to them. So I'm trying to say, wait a minute, you guys, you need to come closer. Let me explain. Let me show you.
Now, what happened to Kodak? Did they get absorbed by somebody?
You know what? I think Kodak went kaputskis.
It did. I thought all its film operations got taken up, like maybe Fuji.
I really don't know. I know that.
Can you even buy the film anymore?
I don't think so. I don't really know because film exists still, of course, and thankfully there's quite a few kids that are into taking film photos.
Yeah,
I know some of them myself, which is fantastic. I love that they're keeping film alive, but I don't really know. I guess Kodak just, did not step into the digital age in time.
Early enough.
And it was just too late. The train had left the station and they were left in the DUST.
You'll hear other spellings like this on Charles Tours. Thank you so much for stopping by again, Charles.
Thank you, George.
That was George with mid-century historian Charles Phoenix. Natascha Drabbe is the founder and executive director of the Netherlands-based nonprofit Iconic Houses, an association of architecturally significant 20th century house museums. Iconic Houses helps house museum owners navigate the constant challenges they face: research, funding, and repairs. She owns the Van Schendel House, designed by late husband Mart Van Schendel, and she creates an international conference for Iconic Houses every 2 years. Here's George chatting with Natascha Drabbe.
Natascha, thank you for coming by.
Thank you for inviting me. What a cool place to have an interview.
Natascha came on her bicycle, and I understand you have been strolling the streets of Palm Springs, visiting things. What have you visited so far?
Oh, I have visited Kreisel's House of Tomorrow and a garden tour of the Kaufmann Desert House. Also a private house. I met someone at the reception, and it's funny because his house, he got an award for the restoration, but he doesn't know who the architect is, so that's a sort of mystery.
Yes.
So that's a nice thing of being here. You meet people, talk about their houses, and so it's super exciting. And the House of Tomorrow, I've seen several houses on my past visits, but now finally I saw that house. And I never saw a house by Kreisel, but it was amazing. All these different shapes of the windows that were cut there at the house during construction. So I've seen a lot already in a few days. It was super, super busy. And in between all these receptions.
All these receptions. Exactly. So little time, so many parties.
Yeah. and so colorful. I come from the Netherlands, and it's now in the winter it's gray and it's dull and rainy, and everybody was in vibrant colors. So I felt totally underdressed and immediately bought something at Trina Turk. Bright yellow.
As you do, of course.
Yeah, you have to.
I packed it with me, but I forgot to put it on this morning. My iconichouses.org black T-shirt.
Oh, yeah.
Yes, which I love and wear all the time. I particularly wear it around North Carolina, where I'm from.
Yeah.
And people ask, what is that? And I get to tell your story.
I saw so many visitors on our website from North Carolina lately, and I wondered, how come?
That's it.
Thank you for promoting Iconic Houses. Yeah.
How long ago did you start the organization?
Well, we launched officially in November 2012 at the
Okay.
Schindler House in Los Angeles, but 2 years before I started my research. So for 2 years I've been doing research to all these famous houses worldwide and gathering the directors' names and the curators, and then asked hundreds of them if they wanted to join a network where we can share knowledge about running and managing these modern house museums. So we are now 11 years online and organized 7 international conferences. So the last one was in Prague and Brno, and we went to Vienna and Ljubljana. It was 9 days. And we decided for the upcoming conferences to have 7 days a maximum.
Yes.
And then have in between the years of the international conferences a weekend, so the people can stay in touch with each other, but it's easier to squeeze it in. And so this year's weekend was in Amsterdam.
Yes.
So we have 3 days. Friday afternoon, we started with the reception at the Museum of the Canals and to get some history backgrounds of this 17th century canal ring and those famous canal houses and the canal cruise. And then we have done all these modern housing schemes. So not villas, but it's in Amsterdam. Amsterdam is actually famous in the early 20th century, especially, for making housing for more humble people, for the workers, but with huge improvements in hygiene, in separate bedrooms for parents and children. The girls had different bedrooms than the boys, and there was a kitchen. And in that period, there was a huge housing shortage, like
Today,
now.
yes.
And people were really lots of people were living in slums. And the Netherlands is famous for these housing schemes. We're very idealistic. We've shown those, and also many private houses. The first skyscraper of Amsterdam, for instance, it had 17 floors.
Okay.
And there are architects living there who opened their houses for us, their apartments. And also a project that was squatted in the 80s. In the 80s, I didn't like squatters at all. I thought it's so weird to take possession of other people's property.
Yes.
But now you see, I mean, the reason why they did it was, of course, because of all the speculation with all those empty buildings. And so I do understand why they did it. Maybe the way how they did it is not such a
Right.
good way. But now some of these former factories, for instance, are now occupied already since the 80s by artists. They have their studios there and their homes. So we include also that part of history in what we're telling to our guests.
Now, as a professional association for house museums, most participants don't know how hard it is to run a house museum. So what are some of the challenges that your members have in common?
A lot of people, especially neighbors of these houses, think that their property devaluates because of the people who visit those museums.
Yeah.
So they complain and they think that these house museums earn a lot of money and that they give up part of their privacy. So it's very difficult to deal with neighbors. Other issues, of course, now with the transition, with the energy transition, it's very difficult because most houses are registered landmarks and you're not allowed to change much. So how can you make it energy efficient with single glass? So that is a huge issue. Then a lot of houses, if they are not very big, if you can't organize events like concerts or lectures or film screenings, it's difficult because it's important that you have repeat visitors. And when you can offer programming or show exhibitions, you have a visitor center, you can have repeat visitors and have more revenue. And if you don't have that space, then people come once and then they've seen the architecture and enjoyed it, and they don't have a reason to come back. So you see that many of these houses at the moment are trying to raise the funds to organize a visitor center adjacent to the house, or try to buy the house next to it and to solve that problem. Also, most of the times they give rooms in the house for their office, or for selling it for little museums.
Little gift shop.
Yeah.
Yes.
So the moment they can buy the house next to it, they can show the house again as it was and in all its glory, and don't give up those rooms any longer.
There are any number of large house museums, like, for instance, the Falling Water Complex. Has been around a long time, has huge numbers of staff, lots of resources, plenty of acreage, parking, visitor center, and is dealing with hundreds of thousands, really, of visitors.
Every 7 minutes, a group of 13 people enters the house.
Every 7 minutes. Wow. I did not know that statistic. So what house is on the other end? What is the smallest house you have?
The smallest house is in Warsaw. It's called the Carret House. And I spread my arms.
Yes.
And this is the width of the house.
Okay.
And it is so funny. It's built in between two apartment buildings. So there was just this narrow...
6 feet. Yes.
Yeah. And it has everything you need. But you enter it, you have to climb stairs, and I don't know the word. So
hallway?
The floor... You go up the stairs and then you open up the floor.
A hatch?
Is that a hatch? Okay.
Yes.
Yeah, so there's a hatch. So you go up the stairs, you open that hatch, then you're on the main floor. It has a little pantry, you can shower, but it is not for permanent habitation. It is used as an artist in residence place. So writers mostly stay there for a week or 2 weeks, but you can visit it and experience how cleverly this small, tiny space is designed. So that's the smallest one.
Okay. And you live in an important, iconic house.
Well, your words. Well, my house is very dear to me, and it is the youngest monument of the Netherlands. It was designed in 1992 by my late husband, Mart van Schijndel. Mart is not as famous as other Dutch architects like Gerrit Rietveld, whose house is UNESCO World Heritage. So I'm quite modest about it, but he was quite a well-known designer in Europe, and he was primarily known for a vase that he designed, and it's called the Delta vase, and that was distributed all over the world and also in the United States. But in his house, he experimented a lot with glass and with silicon. So the house has glass doors that hinge on a silicon sealant seam. And that was never done before. And so there are more of those innovative solutions in the house. And it's a private house, not a museum, but because I open it up for visitors once a month by appointment, I had all these issues that museums have, like, are they allowed to use my toilet? Can they bring in their backpacks? What do I charge for this? And all those things, actually, all those questions and looking for answers, that inspired me to set up the network. I'm a trained architectural historian, and I've been working in PR, and then in trying to keep the ideas of my late husband alive.
Yes.
It came all together in opening up the house and then trying to connect all these people in a network. And now, after 10 years, there is about 30 people that have attended all these conferences, and it feels like a family.
Yes.
They are so happy to see each other again, and they share not only their successes, but also the failures. They're not afraid to tell about things that didn't work. And we are not each other's competitors because there are not that many house museums. So
Right.
you're not too close to one another to be competitors. So that makes it more easy to share your knowledge. And most houses have little budget and few staff members. So when they can learn from each other, that saves them a lot of money. They can't hire experts. Most of the times they don't have enough budget for that.
Yeah, no resources.
Yeah.
Have you had any of your member houses threatened yet with demolition?
Not the member houses, because once a house has become so important that it becomes a museum,
It's safe for the most part.
Sort of, yeah. Although there is one of our member houses in Barcelona, very close to the airport, designed by Antonio Bonet. And that house is in perfect original condition with all the furniture that Bonet designed. But the airport of Barcelona is expanding. And the threat for that house is that the family cannot sell the house if they would wish to do so, because every 2 or 3 minutes an airplane is taking off.
Right.
So you can't have a decent conversation in the house. So the house has no value, no monetary value any longer. So this family is struggling already for years to maintain it. And it's a family, not an organization. It's not supported by the government. So it's so strange that the city of Barcelona or the Spanish government, that they don't support it and try to make a satellite museum of it, connected to the Design Museum of Barcelona, for instance. So they're registered as a national landmark. But the airport is still expanding.
Sure.
And they try to find funds, but the difficult thing is that the airport is so powerful that companies don't want to support the family with funding because of
the airport.
Power. Yeah, it's very political.
I would think that the airport would want to move the house or make some kind
This
of...
is so American.
Yes, I mean...
In Europe, we don't move houses and buildings. That is a huge difference.
Really?
Yeah, sorry, I'm laughing so, but this is really... I can't remember a house in Europe that has been moved. No, well, but there probably is one.
Yeah.
But here it's quite usual to move houses. What we see here with the Illuminary house is 2 times dismantled and reassembled. But, with the houses, good architecture is so connected to its environment. And then moving a house, you sort of amputate it of its...
You do. You lose
Yeah.
a piece of it.
Yeah.
I guess we like it here because the alternative is that the house just disappears entirely.
Yeah.
We just helped move one a number of months ago in Raleigh, North Carolina by George Matsumoto.
Yeah.
It was going to be destroyed.
Uh-huh.
And it moved 7 miles away and is being rebuilt now, and it's going to be fabulous once it goes. Now, what's coming up for you in 2025 and 6 and 7?
Well, 2025 will be our international conference in Chicago in May.
Okay.
And then we will have a pre-conference tour via Racine to Taliesin, Spring Green. And we will end with a post-conference tour in Pittsburgh and visit Falling Water.
Yes.
All to ourselves.
Yes.
For the reception, for the farewell reception, closing reception. So that will be unique. And then, of course, Chicago. There's so much going on. I love Marina City. I've been on the roof of Marina City. And, we visit, of course, Mies van der Rohe's Farnsworth House, but also the Jacobs House, one of the first Usonian houses, which is a very tiny but lovely house and UNESCO World Heritage. And then in 26 we will organize a weekend again.
Okay.
We are thinking now of Barcelona because there's...
Maybe near the airport?
Yeah, absolutely. Easy. The first stop.
First stop.
Then in 27, we already know because we scheduled for 2020, when COVID hit, we had scheduled our conference in Rotterdam. But we couldn't, we changed everything into an online thing. But the program we developed for then was such a wonderful program with tours in Rotterdam, Amsterdam, Utrecht, and then in Brussels and Paris, that we thought we really have to execute this program We already traveled everything and everybody wanted to cooperate. So we're now going to do that in 27.
Okay.
And then we've done the Amsterdam part this year because otherwise we couldn't fit everything in 7 days. And we don't want to have our conferences longer than 7 days.
You can find out more about all these exciting trips and the organization at iconichouses.org. Thanks for dropping by, Natascha. It's always such a pleasure to see you.
Well, gleichfalls. I'm talking German now. It means the same.
Thank you.
George was chatting with Natascha Drabbe. Phillip Jones is the Martini Whisperer, a Canberra, Australia-based craft spirits educator and advocate whose personal collection includes more than 230 types of gin. A master of the bespoke martini, he regularly hosts master classes, public educational events, and corporate events, and he works with distillers to help develop their spirits, especially gins. You can find his honest reviews of a range of spirits at martinywhisperer.com. Here's George whispering martinis and more with the one and only Phillip Jones.
At almost every meeting, there's this thing that people do where they call out the person who has traveled the furthest to be at that meeting. And today it's Phillip Jones, who's traveled, 12,000 miles?
Just about.
Roughly?
Just about.
12,000 miles from Canberra, Australia, to be with us here at the U.S. Modernist Compound, a.k.a. the Hotel Skylark. Hi, Phillip.
It's great to be back poolside with you, George.
Oh, yes. We have had such a great time planning this, haven't we?
It's been over a year in the making, and it's hard. You pinch yourself sometimes, as a little country bumpkin like me, to come all this way to the glamour central of Palm Springs, California, to be with you fabulous people. And, yeah, I'm just thrilled to be here.
Well, you are a specialist in a certain kind of beverage, are you not?
Seems that way. Sometimes everyone's got a side hustle or a little
Yes.
passion or enthusiasm, but it gets away from you like a runaway train. So, yes, so the martini is my quiet obsession. I really should get out more. I really should.
I think you're getting out quite well, actually, from all the photos.
I know, but this is the thing, right? It's the two things I could say to it. One is it's the simplest cocktail in the world with just a handful of ingredients, 2, maybe 3 at a stretch. I don't include a garnish. But there are infinite permutations. And you can be in a bar, for example, and I've been in these situations where you have the same spirit, the same ingredients, the same bartender, the same night, the same place. And every cocktail's a different one. Now, whether it's the chemical reactions at play,
Yes.
one after the other, or there's something else going on there. So it started a little journey, a philosophical journey in some respects, but also a cultural journey, which I'm really interested in. And so coming here, which I would dub the natural habitat of the martini, especially Palm Springs, you can they go together in the mind to some extent. And I've been dipping into some of the bars since I've been here and seeing just what goes on, the way people interact with each other and things like that. So the cocktail is not just the cocktail. The cocktail is a motif in culture. We could break that down a bit, especially in a modernist sense.
It's very much like a nature show. Phillip Jones in the wild with the martini. He now goes into the natural habitat of the martini to see how it's being made. How are they reproducing, for instance?
And friends, you should be aware, this is very early in the morning. This is not cocktail hour. We're talking about this. Certainly here you don't go thirsty. You don't go thirsty in the desert when it comes to martinis here. But you're right, because a great bar to that is the combination of people and the place and the atmosphere is just the cocktails more, and especially here in America, where there's a code of behaviour in certain places. And by that I mean, I was at a place last night, an old restaurant here, has been here for many years, so I was recommended by a local. And you drop in, and you may have 30 blokes. There's one lady, but 30 blokes sitting on the high tops of the bar there. Bartender doing great work, ordered martini straight up. It arrives in about 20 seconds flat.
Wow.
It was not the fastest martini I've ever seen in my life. I don't know where it came from, but boom, I just looked about it, was back, it was there. It was fine. But more importantly, just the banter and the conversation between us. People were there for a chat. They weren't there in their own space. They were quite happy to, where are you from, and all this kind of conversation. I guess the accent helps, breaks the ice, but they'll do it for each other. And it was fantastic. And, got invited here and invited there. And so it's almost like a passport to a club, so to speak.
Yes.
Yeah.
Yes. Now, in addition to martinis, you have a natural connection to modernist architecture. What's that all about?
Well, you mentioned I'm from Canberra, Australia. And in Canberra, It's a new city. It's the capital city of Australia. It's been on a few shows, like Secret City was a show.
I love that show.
Right?
Great.
And it's fun for us because, we know those buildings, we know those spaces, and they kind of mix them up a little bit. The door from here and the interior from there, that's not the same building,
Right.
but that's okay.
Yeah.
That's TV. But we've got this stuff in spades. Not to the glamour level that you have here in Palm Springs, for example. This is the piece de resistance, the crown jewels that were of modernism, but we live with that because the city's really new. Mid-60s really got going in terms of physical build. And so there's groups, and big shout out to my friends at Canberra Modern and other groups around Australia. There's Adelaide and Brisbane and Beaumaris have been on the show
Yes,
as well.
yes.
All these groups who are in many ways inspired, I think, the work that you do here at US Modernist, George, and all your team. Waving the flag, but more importantly, doing the advocacy piece around reminding people and educating people in their own communities of what they've got hidden in plain sight, whether it's residential or commercial or other buildings, churches in some cases we've got. Anyway, so that got under my skin. I came here several years ago. We'd heard about, we were basically just passing through.
Yeah.
Right? My wife and I, Edwina. And so let's go to Palm Springs. We're kind of heading this way anyway. We're coming from New Mexico and through Arizona. And what to expect, to be perfectly frank. And we went, oh my God, it's fantastic, it's beautiful, and you could walk around and ride around and see these places, but you couldn't get into a lot of them. We didn't have the access. We weren't here during the festival time, for example.
Right.
And then we should come back, so we did, and got to see some of these places, and that's, you're a bit starstruck first time out. And now, because I'm actually here as part of your program, and with US Modernists, which is an absolute thrill, I'm below the hood. So
Yes.
I'm inside the tent,
inner workings.
in the inner workings, which is absolutely fascinating. For someone who does events for a living and in my day job and other things, marketing them, the work behind the scenes of you and your team to put together your program is really fantastic. And I was 15. We had a lovely night a couple of nights ago at a magnificent place, a dinner with some colleagues of yours, and it was a spectacular house. It's one of the things you pinch yourself moment,
Right.
To come here. You think. But as stunning as the location and the house itself was the atmosphere of the place. What modernism does. I'll come back another way. When you think these houses were built in the 40s and 50s, they were like spaceships. When you compare to the cars they were driving, I've seen photos of some early trade work.
Yes.
And there's a fantastic modernist house, but the cars look like from the 1930s. So we think, that they're all of a piece. And so these houses with their stainless steel and the aluminium and glass and the concrete, flat roofs. We're used to them now in some respects. But then they were like landing from the future, and they talked about that way.
And they still look like it.
They do, and they've stood the test of time. And we have modern examples of that in Australia, and it's a bit of a trend now to look back as well. But still, the ones that were built in the 60s or even early 70s, people have to remind of that is heritage, because contemporary houses all kind of look a bit like them.
Yes.
Mimic them.
They draw some elements.
They draw some elements from them. And so these groups back in Australia and groups like yourself have to really educate the community saying, well, it looks new, but really that's where this legacy came from and needs to be respected and preserved and cherished.
Yeah. In Australia, do they have difficulty imagining modernist houses from the 60s as being worth saving? Because in America, you can look at a house, it might be 60 years old, which for today it was 1964. But people look at it and go, well, that's not Victorian, that's not Cape Cod, that's not colonial revival. All that stuff is old. This house doesn't even look old. Why am I supposed to preserve this?
That's exactly right. And that's the point I was trying to make, is that, what we might say hidden in plain sight, that education piece needs to go on and on and on. It's turning around, and we see it more in the popular culture and things like that. So yes, but that work is really, really important to remind people and educate, but also what is heritage. And I'm not qualified to speak to this too much, but I know people work in that world where people want to do development. They move into a nice neighbourhood, say downtown, inner city Canberra, and those suburbs were built in the 60s and so on. And they go, well, that's fine, but I just want to knock it down and put a McMansion up.
Right.
Still. And so there's always these battles, these planning battles that go on continuously. So how do you strike that balance? And I think back home, they're looking at changing some planning laws so you can have buildings, but some new technology, maybe solar panels. It's a very sustainable government we have where I live, and they're kind of forward-looking. So how do you get that balance between preserving what's important and allowing for some adaptive reuse and things like that? So these discussions go on.
Now, you were doing some classes on martinis for us, and when people come, what do they typically know and not know about the martini?
Ooh, that's a good question, George. That's why it's a good podcast.
I mean, they know shaken, not stirred from James Bond. Everyone's heard that.
There's a lot to answer for there.
Yeah.
There's a couple of things. One is what I like to convey to people is there's martinis and there are martinis, shall we say, right?
Yes.
And for those who'd never had a martini, they're a bit scary. And they come with a potency warning, let's be frank, right? They're not for the faint-hearted. And that's part of its allure. The lure of the danger, it's
The 3 martini lunch would knock you out.
It should. But here's the deal. Back in the day, they were smaller, right?
Oh, they were?
Yeah. They were like a 1 ounce, one measure, say.
Okay.
Go back in time, the glasses were smaller. I mean, the cocktail glass, a really modernist invention. I think it was an exhibition in New York, maybe even the 20s even, or a modernist exhibition.
Okay.
But the cocktail glass kind of made an appearance. The martini and modernism are very closely entwined. And it's a purely American invention. It's a purely Californian invention, since we're sitting here in California.
Yeah.
Right, so you had these ingredients from the old world, the vermouth, for example, and the spirit, like gin or vodka, as the case may be. Some clever America had the great idea of put the two together and create a cocktail out of it, right? Back in the old world, they were just their own separate things, separate ingredients, different consumption.
Was the martini invented by a man named Martin? I've always wondered if there was a connection to the founder.
Well, no. There's a few, like all good cocktails, there's a bit of lore.
Yes.
There was an ancestor to Martini called the Martinez.
Okay.
And the story goes that California Gold Rush time. So what's that, 1850s, 1860s, thereabouts?
1849, yeah.
Yeah, thank you. And so he washed up in Martinez, he got lucky, wanted a cocktail, the guy rustled up something for him, and it had different ingredients. There's a style of gin called Old Tom gin. You can still get it. It's a semi-sweet kind of style of gin. Before they made what we call the dry style, the London dry style, which has got no additives, no sugars, no flavouring. Anyway, he rustled this drink up. He quite liked it. Then he went on to San Francisco, make me one of these again, kind of thing, and the word kind of spread. That's deemed to be the kind of the ancestor of the martini, but I make them every so often and present them someone because it's actually not a bad drink. It's got some vermouth in it and some maraschino, like a cherry kind of liqueur, and it's sweet. So it's quite sweet to our palate. Mm-hmm. Anyway, cut forward a couple of decades, and both San Francisco and Martinez both make claim, by the way, to the birthplace of the martini. I think there was court cases involved at some point.
Oh, wow. Okay.
Be that as it may, that was kind of the genesis of it. But as time gone on, so the recipe's evolved a lot, and you've gone from the ratios of vermouth, sometimes all sweet vermouth, and some say that the name Martini was from the Martini vermouth.
Oh.
The brand.
Okay.
You got Cinzano, because the Italian vermouth came to America quite early with the immigrants. Again, 1860s, 1870s even. So those vermouths were floating around in America for quite some time. And so maybe this cocktail originally maybe had some sweet vermouth as opposed to a dry vermouth, which is current now, was on the back of the Martini brand, or they piggybacked on it. But certainly washed up in recipe books quite early in the 1900s, thereabouts, and it's gone on from there. And now we have this version where we are literally infinite permutations, thousands of spirit brands, hundreds types of vermouth. And it's the only cocktail, again, I come back full circle with my quiet obsession.
Yes.
It's really made in partnership or collaboration with the maker. So if you go to a bar, order a margarita, you get a margarita.
Right.
But they're going to ask you, what gin do you want? What spirit do you want? What vermouth? How dry? What garnish? Do you want lemon? Do you want straight up? Whatever.
All those questions.
All those questions. Make your own adventure cocktail, so to speak.
Right.
And lo and behold, you get kind of, what you want. There's nothing else out there that does that, And you cut forward again to popular culture where often the martini is a cipher for the character in a book, It was featured in Hemingway, it featured in Scott Fitzgerald's books very early on in the 30s. So from the get-go, there was something about the cocktail that spoke about, danger or risk or something.
Intrigue, drama.
What's going on. You can't do that over a fluffy duck or a grasshopper, right? It doesn't speak the same language.
Right.
Yeah. So
the Mai Tai doesn't lend itself so much to genre.
Not so much. So it comes back to your question. The martini comes with a lot of cultural weight. So I like to impart some of that to the guests. So they're not just drinking a drink. It's actually, a good martini are the ones you drink with intention. I talk about, in one of my articles on my website, the different types of martinis, and they're not the Gibson or the Espresso or whatever. They're the glamour martini or the tribute martini or the necessary martini, so to speak, because you're making them at home, for example, with, am I just going on a journey? Do I want to make, try something new and go on a little spiritual adventure, so to speak, or am I having a martini and holding my hand because it makes me feel better and a bit glamorous?
Yes,
right.
At
a party or something like that. So It can play a number of psychological roles as well. I can lay out all day long, George. Don't worry, I can do this all day long.
The espresso martini that you mentioned is kind of having its day right now. Very popular all across the globe.
Yeah, and it's one of the few martinis. It goes back to a Soho bar, an English gentleman who came up with it. And the story goes, famous supermodel at the time, 80s, thereabouts. I'm thinking it's Naomi Campbell or someone like that was the rumour. Anyway, still wanted to party on his nightclub, had to get up in the morning for a shoot, so she asked for something that was strong enough to keep her partying but could wake her up at the same moment. There's different language involved, but it was a G-rated show. And he had an espresso machine, he had vodka and a shaken. And yeah, it's crazy. It's kind of the unofficial cocktail for Australia. I don't know why we adopted it. It's everywhere. You can get it in cans. You can get it on tap in some places.
I've never seen a martini on tap.
Oh, it's very convenient. Because years and years ago, I was
Note to self, order for house.
I make it with some spiced rum instead of vodka sometimes. That could be really fun. And I like to dust mine with nutmeg instead of the coffee beans.
Oh, yeah.
So I'm going to do that in one of my demonstrations here during the week for your guests. It's really fun. Just mix up just a little bit. It's kind of a daytime drink as well. You know, I think people psychologically go, it's got coffee and it'll just perk me up before cocktail hour or whatever the case. Well, you see it after dinner for dessert. No one's going to judge. I'm more of a purist myself. I think the other fun bit is, years ago, I'm part of this festival every year in Canberra called Enlighten, and it's a cultural festival. And when I come back to Australia, I've got another show performance there at the old Parliament House. And we do 80s cocktails. It's a lot of fun. We have jazz music and, I wear more colourful jackets than you do, George.
Yes, great, excellent.
I have different one for every cocktail. I take people back to the 80s and the heyday of the 80s cocktails, and thank God we've moved on a bit since some of those very they glow in the dark, some of these cocktails. They really do. It was at the Parliament House, a very formal building, and I was asked to do cocktails for the occasion. We had 400 guests, black tie masquerade ball, very, very beautiful night under stars on the roof of the Parliament, one time only. And we did espresso martinis. And my whole team, because you got to get that lovely creamy froth on top.
Yes.
And I had to rotate them every 15 minutes because these poor young guys, as fit as they were, their arms are wearing out because they were shaking so much. So we won't do 400 espresso martinis again anytime soon. That's just asking a bit too much.
Wow. So are there martini robots yet? I mean, I assume that's coming along the way.
I did see one last year. Some people send me things from around the world on my social media.
They have them on cruise ships, I know.
It's just wrong. There is one. But you can get pre-mixed. And even back in the day, coming back to our story about the origins, if I'm thinking right, even like in the early 1900s, pre-mixed martinis were appearing.
Oh.
In American market, so I guess in a bottle, and basically you just pour it over ice, give it a shake, and you're good to go, right? And you see these around still, and some are actually really, really nice. And so basically it takes all the thinking out of it. You just have to chill it, pour it in glass, and you're fine. That's okay. The trick is and this is what I often do when I do like events or special function. And folks at home can do this. You've got some friends coming over, you can pre-mix your martini. If you've got a bunch of friends and you don't want to muck around too much, you just decide on your ratios if you've moved to your spirit, and some bitters. Orange bitters is always, a couple of few drops always makes a nice touch. And you make a big jug of it, a litre or whatever you want to do.
Big pitcher,
a little bit of water, because this is the thing too. Like the chilling of the martini is not just making it cold. Temperature is really key. We could talk all day about temperature and ice, George. We can't do that, but you can just scale up the ratios. You put it in your fridge or your freezer. It won't freeze. And you're good to go when the time comes. All you do is just stir it over ice or give it a quick shake if that's your preference into a chill glass, and you're done. So they were doing that way back when. So clearly efficiency, again, a purely American way of looking at things. Make it fast, like our friend at the bar last night. These cocktails appeared in seconds flat. So there's a genius in that too.
One of the crossovers between martinis and modernist architecture is that during the mid-20th century, at least in most of the houses that we follow, people were very intentional about creating bars in their houses. Sometimes they were sit-down bars. Often they were bar closets that you would open up the doors and you would find this array of equipment and spirits and a little sink, usually.
Yeah.
And then by the 70s and 80s, people weren't building bars in their houses anymore.
Well, there's probably a good health reason for that.
Yeah. We do want to talk about the responsible aspect of all this, folks. But
that's true. in the places I've seen, it's a lot of fun to see these literally built-in infrastructure. Clearly, the consumption habits have changed. I'm always one to emphasise responsible consumption of booze. You raise an interesting point about this kind of, again, here we're in a resort town. So the context of this sort of physical infrastructure makes perfect sense. You're here for the weekend, you're here for the winter, and you've got some friends over. And why would you want to go out when you can just do the entertaining at home?
Right.
But you raised the point about this ecosystem that sits behind the cocktail. And by that I mean the technology, the cultural moment that is there. Again, the symbolism of the cocktail. It wasn't really about getting hammered, so to speak. It was the conviviality of the atmosphere. People come over for a cocktail hour. It's a cocktail hour, then you go on for dinner or do whatever. It's not a big all-night drinking session.
Right.
So again, the cultural consumption and the iconography or the symbolism of the cocktail is all tied into the physical build as well. Does that make sense? Yeah.
And people are now finding that they want to build little bars in their closets. They're refashioning closets as bars. They're putting the doors on them. They're sometimes piping in the sinks. They're building in the shelving. And they're finding out that maybe for $1,000, $1,500, their closet has now become their entertainment station.
That's really interesting, isn't it? I've got a theory I'm just making up on the fly here. With the lockdowns that happened over the last few years, people rediscovered the importance of home and maybe reluctance to go out in some cases and go, well, let's make our habitat even better, so to speak. Who wants to go out and do people when you can just do your entertaining at home?
Yeah.
There may be a bit of an impulse behind that, but it comes back also, I think, to, the glamour that cocktails can represent.
Yes.
I did a fun thing a few weeks ago. There was Americans that live in Costa Rica, and they reached out to me via my Instagram channel, and they want to do a cocktail class virtually.
Ah, wonderful.
It was an absolute hoot, lovely people. They think they were yoga instructors. So it's kind of, you really want to do espresso martinis? No, it's all about balance. We had a good gig about that. And they put me on a big screen at home, and I could see all the beautiful palm trees behind them and things like that. They had all the makings of. And again, it's an excuse to get some really special friends over. It was an experience, it was an occasion, it wasn't just a party. And this is the thing I guess we get into, is that what people are looking to now is these experiences. So when I go out with friends or even at home, it's not just, and when I do my things, it's almost the cocktail's an excuse.
Right.
To bring people together. And again, that's the joy of it for my part. That's what people come to the sessions that I'll be running here. We've got this cute little room, I'm just looking at it right now. We're going to transpose that at best into a really happy, convivial space where they come in strangers and they're going to leave as friends.
Right.
And yeah.
So you sort of go from downward dog to happy dog.
Zoomy dog? Yeah. Dogs doing zoomies around the pool?
Later, sleepy dog.
Yeah, we'll see.
Phillip, thank you so much for talking with me. It's always a pleasure.
Likewise.
And we look to seeing you back another year.
I'll be there. Thank you so much, George. Great to be here.
That was George with the Martini Whisperer, Phillip Jones. LA-based stylist Andrew Votero is best known for his work for actor Jeff Goldblum. A graduate of Brown University, he has written for GQ, Esquire, Vanity Fair, InStyle, and the Wall Street Journal magazine. And he's done advertising work for Disney+, Netflix, Nike, Jeep, and Bonobos. In what he calls a crazy and impossible blessing from the universe, he purchased John Lautner's gorgeous Windsong cabin. It's perched above the San Gorgonio Pass, just outside of Palm Springs, and Andrew purchased it from past podcast guest Donna Lauren in 2021. From Palm Springs, here's George with Andrew Votero.
Andrew, I noticed in our research that you work frequently with Jeff Goldblum, and he has this kind of atmospheric vibe around him that everybody wants to be around. It's incredible. What is that exactly?
I think a lot of people have had that experience with Jeff. He just makes you feel so great about yourself. He's positive and engaging and curious and fun and always ready for an adventure. And he does have this sort of magic quality to him that he brings to sort of everything he touches or comes in contact with. And I do feel very lucky. We've been working together for more than 10 years now, and I feel like couldn't ask for a better client, a better friend. We have a lot of fun together.
And you have purchased another celebrity a house over the mountain here.
Yes.
Tell me about that.
Yeah, that is another dream come true. Truthfully, So I work in fashion, and when I came out to LA, was lucky enough to start doing some shoots in some of John Lautner's houses, and studied architecture in college and was already always aware of his work. But this was the first time I was really in some of his houses. And my God, absolutely incredible and inspiring. But never had the actual dream of living in one of his houses, because it just felt like, dreaming about living on Mars or something, just kind of totally improbable, totally impossible. I think there's like 100 of his buildings left. The price that they sell for, it was just, never even bothered to have that dream. And then the whole thing, finding the house, learning about it, purchasing it, everything, I wasn't looking for a house, didn't think financially. It was really within my near future. It's funny because I actually had met with an astrologer that predicted that I would be buying real estate east of Los Angeles, and to the month he predicted it. And
wow, well done, astrology.
Oh my God, I know. So the house is called Windsong, and I stumbled on it. Actually, Barbara Bester had gone up and visited it when it was put on the market, and I saw it on the Explore page of Instagram. I actually wasn't following Barbara at that time. And I was like, oh my God, I'd never heard of this house. I must have seen it on your website at some point, because that's my favorite website on the entire internet, the Lautner project.
The Lautner Archive.
Exactly. And I spent many hours on that. I don't know, what can I say about this house? Those Dutch architects, the worst remodel of any Lautner. Although I think that was before the Alexander House down in Long Beach was flipped, and I would put that one up as the worst.
So tell me about this house that you bought. It was owned by a famous actress from the 60s.
It was. That's who I bought it from, an actress, a singer, Donna Lauren. But the house was built originally for Marco Wolf, the same Marco Wolf that built the Wolf House in Los Angeles, which is sort of the much more famous sister house. And it's sort of funny because it was just purchased by the designer at Louis Vuitton, who was an old boss of mine when I worked at Balenciaga, when he was the designer there. And so that just sold, I want to say, like 12 million, 14 million or something like that.
Your cabin didn't cost that much.
No, my cabin did not cost that much. And it's an interesting project because, sort of forgotten by everybody, and sort of nobody paid any attention to it. Almost more lost and more forgotten than the Salkin House in Echo Park, actually. Mm-hmm. I've spent many hours in the Lautner archive at the Getty, and it's wild to see how extensive that is. Christmas cards, John Lautner's Christmas cards from over the years. Fully detailed plans for houses that were never built. Sheets and sheets and sheets. You could build it today if the site were still available. But my house has like 5 or 6 sheets, and that's it. And for many years was considered unbuilt. And when I bought it also, it's been considered a remodel. And, finding out about the house has been really fascinating. Marco Wolf was a gay man, and then the second owner, it was sold in 1975 to Martin Green, who's also a gay man that died of AIDS basically in the house, spent like maybe the last week of his life in hospice back in Santa Monica. But the house, unfortunately, is, sort of by extension, another victim of the AIDS crisis, actually. Because at that time, Martin's neighbor down the road, who had sort of become his caretaker on his deathbed, was the executor of his estate. And at that time was sold in 1992 to a local couple that I will not name, because they ruined the house.
Oh,
and it's sort of funny because actually they were the ones that found the Lautner plans. They were sort of passed down in some owner's binder, and tried contacting the Lautner Foundation, but at that time had already sort of begun these really, really brutal, insensitive alterations to the home. And so, I think that they were in contact with Frank Escher. They sent him some photos. He was like, that's not a Lautner house. I don't know what that is, but that's not a Lautner. The more, it's so funny because all of the things that I think made it unappealing to other prospective buyers, made it really exciting to me. I mean, I've been in 8 or 9 Lautner homes, and I'm pretty sure of all the ones I've been in, my site is the best. I'm on a little hilltop, sort of in a valley, surrounded by mountains, 360-degree views everywhere, and, almost no neighbors. My neighbors are the deer, and the coyotes and the foxes. And so the house is really like a theater for nature, even the way that the windows are designed. When you're sitting on the couch, it's just, I don't have a TV there. I don't watch TV up there. I watch what the clouds are doing and what the light is like on the mountains up there. And it's going to be a lifelong project for me. I am not sort of like the typical Lautner owner in that I don't have a lot of money. And so, buying the house was a stretch, and I really want to do justice to the house. It's interesting, the story of, its construction. Marco Wolf had purchased the property in 1964. So this is around 3 years after Lautner finished the Wolf House in LA. Asked Lautner, come up to this cabin. It had always been considered a remodel because the only surviving sheets in the archives say alterations to Marco Wolf's cabin. Mm-hmm. But the sighting alone of the house, Lautner was there. For sure he was there. And what I could surmise would be the first wave of construction is sort of like a square cabin where each of the 4 corners are perfectly aligned to the cardinal directions. So each of the beams faces north, south, east, west. And from the ground up, it was only him. And it matches sort of, there's a firsthand account of Marco Wolf finding the land, asking for a really private, safe escape from Los Angeles. And it's true. There's not like huge expanses of glass windows like you see in some of Lautner's other works. It's more like almost like film strips, like long,
what used to be called picture windows.
Yeah, picture windows, And interesting to see, there's an interesting comparison in part of the house to the Obler complex in Malibu that Lautner supervised for Wright, and just some really interesting details, sort of a zigzag concrete wall that matches the Wolf House back in Los Angeles. And I know that Lautner did not spend a ton of time on this project, especially because within a year or two, Marco Wolf actually purchased another parcel of land up in Idlewild and asked Lautner to start working on that. And that was a huge project, ultimately unbuilt, that obviously the Lautner office was investing a lot of time and a lot of energy in. And there's complete, ready-to-build plans there. And then Marco Wolf was like, oh, this is too expensive. I'm not going to build it. Gave it to a local architect, Dennis McGuire. He built something up there. And that was kind of the end of it. And it's interesting because the unbuilt Lautner cabin from Marco Wolf up in Idlewild, dated 1975, the same year that Marco Wolf put up both the Wolf House in LA for sale and Windsong for the first time. Okay. So there was some dramatic falling out that they had, either a fight over, Lautner must have been quite upset about not being able to build that project, which was stunning. You can see there's photographs of the models, the full plans are in the archive. It was incredible. It would have been one of his most impressive homes. But then I wonder if Marco Wolf had financial troubles, or just interesting to sell both your 2 Lautner homes at the same year,
right.
So
how high up are you?
4,000 feet. They call it, condor level, which I think is really beautiful.
So you have seasons, unlike most Lautner houses.
Yeah, I have seasons, but it's nice because I would describe them as gentle seasons. Idlewild, that Perlman cap, snow, you need chains on your tires. We had one sort of freak snowstorm last year. I was snowed in for a week up there and couldn't get out, and no plows. It doesn't really, not like in Idlewild where you're getting feet and feet of snow. Sometimes a couple inches, but usually, after a few days, it'll melt away. So it's nice.
Now, what do you want your contribution to the legacy to be with this house?
Yeah. Oh, gosh. I wish everybody could actually have this experience. I would like to find some way to sort of share my experience with finding this house and restoring it with others, because It's pretty incredible. And
Well, we'll come visit next year.
oh yeah, I know. I mean, the house is in rough shape. A lot of original details have been removed, but there's enough really special things there that I'm excited about. And it just feels like, you know, this house never got sort of anybody's full attention. You know, Marco Wolf, you know, he had already bought that other plot. So sort of already his attention had shifted. And Lautner, I mean, it's just, I think actually the house is really a testament to Lautner's genius. Maybe he was there a couple days. Maybe he spent a few hours sketching some things. There's some beautiful sketches on the plans, these rough sort of gestural lines. The house is like a little cap sort of on top of this hill and is designed to look like it's sort of jutting out from these boulders, which were never brought in. The boulders are still not there.
Where do you buy boulders?
Well, you know, the drive up to Idlewild, up 243, I think that's where Lautner was like, oh, these boulders. I mean, the boulders on that drive are incredible. These huge kind of, they look like ocean waves in stone or something. And so he had envisioned kind of like a set of them forming a little V around the back corner of the house. And then the roof kind of rising out of these boulders. And the roof even meant to be cut around the boulders, you know. So, you know, that was never done. And even with such minor focus, I do think it's just a testament to Lautner's genius. I mean, the house is incredible. And I've been in the famous ones.
Yeah.
And it's small. I want to say it's like 1,200. It's small. It's very small. Like the Perlman cabin originally, there were sort of no real bedrooms. There were a couple sliding partitions.
Right.
And then it's also really interesting, you know, he drew multiple floor plans for the house. Obviously, only one was built. The best one was not. In the best one, he kind of had converted the carport into a master bedroom suite, sort of like he did at the Carling house. I'm not trying to be hyperbolic, but it felt like finding a forgotten Da Vinci painting.
Yeah.
I wonder if in the future things will catch up. I mean, I know that some of these homes, astronomical prices, but you just look around and see things being torn down. And so to discover this house, to sort of realize that nobody has been really ever paying attention to it, to sort of find out from all the research that it's not a remodel. It looks like a ground up Lautner design. I'm a little bit like, oh my God, how was I the only one to put this together? You know what I mean?
This is your destiny. Luke.
Yeah, it feels like that. The whole thing felt like destiny. And I have just recently, in the past couple weeks, signed a contract with Helena, who's going to come out. And
Helena Arouette?
Yes. Yeah.
Lautner's protege?
Yeah.
And successor?
Yeah. I mean, even speaking with her, it was like sort of like speaking to a legend, you know. I mean, she just finished the Bob Hope. It's a very different scale project than the Bob Hope house.
Well, at the Bob Hope, you can have 500 people over for dinner.
Yeah.
I don't think that's your capacity.
No. But really, like, in wanting to give that house full respect, sort of felt like, and I know there are other people that are famous for working on Lautner homes as well, but I think in terms of what would John Lautner do, I think she's the only person alive that really can know the answer to that question.
True.
You know?
True.
I'm really, really excited to have her eyes on the house. You know, because there are some things. Lautner was still sort of working out some things, especially towards the back portion of the house and how to connect it to the front part. And, you know, obviously he renovated his own homes many times. And it's not like renovating a Neutro where you're trying to absolutely original, everything, don't change anything,
right.
You know, repair what needs to be repaired. Lautner was not doing that. And his conversion of the carport at the Carling house is sort of like something I am constantly looking at, because that's, you know, the carport portion of my house has the most insanely beautiful ceiling, tongue and groove board ceiling, and this beautiful arch. And so it should be the master bedroom. And those terrible owners in the 90s sort of did that in a really bad Home Depot stucco kind of way. That carport actually was excavated. It's 2 feet below the rest of the house. And so Lautner had envisioned kind of this little balcony almost, this elevated area where there's a bathroom and a closet and a little sitting area. And then you step down to where the bed was. Because essentially I do feel like I'm missing sort of like the first round draft of construction plans and wondering sort of what happened to those, who drew them, who was using them. And realizing in my research, it's a race against the clock because these people that worked in that office are all getting quite old. And just very aware of how much history is kind of on the brink of extinction, basically. And so wanting to sort of reach out and find those people and talk to those people, learn about what it was like, because my house was being built during a bunch of other projects. My house was constructed between 66 and 68, and so work on Bob Hope had already started happening. And I'm also in a more isolated area, so I'm trying to find out, who were the contractors that worked on this place? What members of Lautner's team might have been involved.
If you know anyone that has been involved in this house.
Yes, please.
We have an APB out.
Yeah, Banning, California.
Banning, California, the Wolf Cabin, John Lautner. You can see this house and all of Lautner's houses at usmodernist.org/Lautner. Andrew, thank you so much for joining me and telling me about this great experience of yours.
George, thank you so much for having me. I mean, you were a resource to me also, even as I was in contract on the house. Yeah, it's my favorite website on the entire internet, and I'm not exaggerating.
Thank you.
Truly, thank you.
That was George's conversation with Andrew Votero.
Thanks for listening. U.S. Modernist Radio is underwritten by June Goldfinger and Jeff Taylor. Sponsors of Circle, Square, Triangle, a traveling exhibition on the architecture of Myron Goldfinger, and by Diane Bald and the Budman family, restoring significant architecture in Palm Springs, Toronto, Los Angeles, and Malibu. Want to go with us to Modernism Week in February 2025? Email me at george@usmodernist.org. Okay, Tom, it's all yours.
Visit usmodernist.org's massive archives to listen to past shows, discover documentation of 20,500 significant modernist houses, and access 4.3 million pages of classic 20th century architecture magazines. U.S. Modernist Radio is produced by Soundtracks Recording Studios in Raleigh, North Carolina. Our theme song is performed by George Smart and Robinson Earl, with Kelly Policelli on guest research. U.S. Modernist Radio is a production of Modernist Archive Incorporated, a nonprofit educational archive for the documentation, preservation, and promotion of modernist residential design. I'm Tom Guile. George and I will be back next year with more Staying Out Late for a show at the Palm Springs Purple Room edition of U.S. Modernist Radio.